Like it or not, your current level of income cannot be guaranteed into the distant future. It's an unsettling thought that is the reality facing countless Kenyans right now. With a reduced salary or no salary at all, how can we stretch the shillings we have to meet our needs over the next few months? Centonomy CEO Waithaka Gatumia joins me now. Waithaka, a very present fear right now for many Kenyans. People are dealing with huge gaps in their pockets right now, unforeseen, and they're now met with the decision of having to stretch money that they thought they didn't have to, and then even worse, for how long? How do you begin to even do that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Very quickly, the one tool for financial planning, and now we have to use it, is called a budget. Now, before it's a good thing to have, everybody should work with it, we do it in general, but now more than ever, we must plan and have a budget. I want you to go down to your personal finances and down what economy we call it the ABC budget. A is for essentials. B is for things that are important but they're not essential. And C is for everything else. When you put all your items in the budget in that category, then you can make some serious decisions on how you're going to spend. And as the money right now, we should be cutting off all our C expenses and really focusing on the A and B, A being essential and B being important but not essential. If we don't do this, I'm telling you, we'll be in a huge hole as far as our finances are concerned. And so we must begin with the primary tool of financial planning, which is called a budget.
All right, Waithaka, and just practically speaking, you talked about A, essentials, B, important, C, everything else. For someone watching, they're wondering, okay, what are essentials for the average Kenyan family, if you will?
No problem. Essential: food, shelter, education. And at this moment, the education cost may be different from what it was beforehand. But right now, food, shelter, education, and healthcare. Those are the primary A expenses. And listen, not all food is an A expense. What you used to go out to the supermarket and just buy that extra chocolate, or you would eat out every weekend, that's not an A expense. Food now is just what you need to eat. So I think that's encapsulates pretty much all the A expenses right now.
And how does someone deal with the residual effects of a lower salary or no salary at all? So having that very difficult conversation with your landlord that not as much is coming in and I don't know if I'll be able to honor my rent, things like school fees or even a loan. How do you have that discussion with those institutions and those individuals?
Have it as early as possible. Be clear and state your intention. Because even with the lending facilities like banks and SACCOs, excuse me, if you're able to discuss in advance and say, this is my situation, this is what I foresee, this is what we're looking at, we can begin to plan. Now, I just wanted to mention there are those who've been hardest hit right now, Victoria, who don't even have an income. What they thought they were going to earn has disappeared. Right now is the time for you to sit and to begin to think, what can I do? This is what I honestly believe, Victoria. Where you are right now as an individual, as a Kenyan, you have a great brain, you have great energy, you have great opportunities around you. If you sit down and focus, we can begin to find some solutions. This idea of sitting home and just waiting for things to go wrong, that's where we'll find ourselves in big trouble. God has blessed you with a big brain. He has blessed you with great opportunities around you. It is time to use them to figure out what are you going to do next. You need to sit down, take a breath, and then say, this is what I am going to do. I hope I've answered your question.
And Waithaka, honestly speaking, even though, yes, we may have big brains, that brain right now is being bogged down by the stress of not having money and trying to figure out how to do life. A tweet here from Agosh Derongo saying, most households are currently surviving from hand to mouth. That's a reality. If this situation persists, many face the risk of virtually starving as their finances will be depleted with no jobs, grounded businesses, and people may resort to crime. I mean, this has been the status quo when you think about majority of Kenyans. many are casual laborers and and rely on a daily income. When you're told to stay at home, that's not practical for most of them.
Here's the thing, Victoria, I get you, and there are those who must leave their house, and I think you've done an excellent job at showing all the things that you can do to protect yourself. But here's the one thing. Look, we are in this situation. It is real. We cannot run from it. We cannot hide from it. And therefore, we must at some point, yes, I love the story that you gave beforehand, which was about mental health. But at some point, you have to sit down and say, this is the situation. We're going to cut back on our expenses significantly if we're in a situation where there's no income, and then begin to think actively, what can we do? I love those Kenyans who are out there right now who are making face masks because there's a shortage of face masks. So with a little bit of income, I just saw just down our street over here, there's a company that was making furniture. They have completely stopped making furniture and they're now just simply making face masks. So with a little bit of capital, there's an opportunity if we can look for it. Can you find a place? If you sit down and think through it, I honestly believe we're ingenuitive enough to find that solution.
Speaking of opportunities, I've seen a lot of articles saying that in this time, we'll see a lot of businesses spring up. What can someone do? You talked about the face mask, but something that would be lucrative and sustainable after this corona pandemic has passed that you can carry forward. What opportunities could Kenyans start getting into?
Victoria, there are many. We as a company, we train. And we had lots of people in classes. We had hundreds of people in classes. So the moment that gatherings were canceled, we were in trouble. And so we sat down with our management team and said, what must we do? And we immediately moved over 300 students onto an online platform. If you're a teacher, what are you doing at home right now? I, as a parent, I'm struggling. I have a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old in the house. If you put up a video on YouTube that was teaching them, I'm telling you, I would be there. And if you told us to pay for it, I'm sure some of us would be able to do so. It is about creativity. And at this time, I know when there's stress and there's pressure, but that pressure will force you to come up with ideas that will not only save you, but those around you. Victoria, if you don't mind for 1 second, I want to mention that at this time, this is the time to take care of people around you. Those who still have an income, those who are still earning. This is the time as you cut back on your own spending. Begin to think about those in your community who you can begin to support. This is the time to give generously, but you can only do so if you have managed your own income.
Another concern here, Waithaka, in terms of how to deal if we go into a lockdown, for instance, and no source of income. There's an individual here asking, what do you do in that case? And let me just also add to that, Paul Ngatia saying, I'm from Nakuru, jobless prior to the pandemic invasion. My quiz to Waithaka is the likelihood of joblessness continuity as lots of people are now at home. What options are there for the youth?
Man, my brothers, my sisters, young people, you guys are our solution. I loved it. I told you there's a company just down the road here. They were making furniture. Now they've said it's face masks that are needed. That's what they're doing. I need you to sit down and look at your community. Where is the need? Right now, food is a big need. So maybe there's a plot that you've had that you've never been using. It's up country. This is the time to maybe call your cousin who's there. Don't travel. Call your cousin who's there and say, plant potatoes, plant something. This is a time for creativity. Victoria, I wish I had all the answers for the youth, but I honestly believe if we sit down and think through what are the problems in our community right now, what can I do to support? I can assure you that these young people will find a solution that can begin to earn them at least their daily bread. But it takes time. It takes a moment to think through. Can you begin to put together? I love this. We bought a hand washing container, and all it was a mtungi that they had put a tap into. That was a young person's idea. So they're selling mtungis with taps so that buildings like ours can be able to have hand washing centers. That was a problem we had that we didn't even know, and someone solved it and is making money off it now.
I have to ask this. I know you're not a psychologist or counselor, Waithaka, but quite a few people on Twitter are asking this. And of course, they hear you on ingenuity and coming up with business ideas and whatnot. But how do you cross from a mindset that has for so long been on survival mode to now start thinking up ideas of how to get out of the rut you're in? It's extremely difficult, but how does someone do that?
Wow, I am not a psychologist, and let me tell you, I've gone through my own anxiety. I've had some sleepless nights, Victoria, but here's the thing. We have to make a choice. And I honestly believe in our classes at Centonomy, we've always talked about that your personal financial management as a series of choices. And at some point, you have to sit down and say, we can either roll over and die, or we can say we are going to beat this coronavirus and this situation. And it takes that one moment of making a decision and saying, you know what, I have the ability, I have the time, I will figure it out. And if this doesn't work, you move on to the next idea and to the next idea, because we cannot just sit back and say it's not going to work. Everybody right now is going through a moment where they're trying to think, how do we get through this? Everyone has to get to that point of making a choice. And I hope that those who are listening to me right now will begin to make the choice and say, I'm going to survive this. I'm going to come up with an idea that will take me through this. I'm going to cut back to the bare necessities and then be able to achieve my dream. We will get through this, Kenya. We will.
All right. Thank you so much, Waithaka, as always, keeping it positive, and certainly it won't get easier from here on out, but it will get better at some point. On that note, let's take a short break here on Citizen Weekend. Much more ahead, including my conversation with Dr. Wale Akinye.